As some of you already know, I've dealt with some pretty severe and debilitating health anxiety, general anxiety, and panic attacks for around 5 years. During all those years, I've read, watched, and listened to so many tips and tricks on anxiety recovery and basically tried all of them out at some point. But one thing that was pretty much always on the foreground of any anxiety help content was this, for me, very mysterious idea of accepting anxiety. You know, this method when you're facing a tremendous amount of distress and your entire body is overwhelmed by all kinds of frightening symptoms. The basic idea of this method is to learn and accept these sensations and just let them pass naturally, without that overpowering and overwhelming urge to make the symptoms stop. The concept here is that by not reacting to your anxiety and by not responding in fear to the symptoms, you will get rid of that inner friction and that inner battle, which will then automatically de-escalate and decompose that buildup of stress, and hence get you out of that anxiety attack. And while this whole concept makes a lot of sense and is probably exactly the way one should ideally go on when facing an overwhelm point, I often had the feeling that it is something impossible, or at least close to impossible, to pull off. And that mostly because I think I went on about it the wrong way. And my guess is that many of you do too. I can of course only talk for myself here, and the methods and ideas I share have been tested on the huge sample size of 1. I am not a professional anxiety coach or anything, and I'm just a guy who has managed to recover from some pretty bad anxiety who is sharing his approach. And I definitely don't want to offend anyone here. However, I do think that this approach is so often misused because we only try to implement it when things have already turned so extreme and we've already reached a stage of panic or something very close to it. We believe that we can use acceptance as some kind of tool to make everything stop and find a sense of calm in a very uncomfortable situation. What happens is, we feel this intense buildup of stress, we notice how our minds can't stop focusing in on a sensation, and then we remember this technique that everyone is talking about. So in the midst of feeling completely overwhelmed, we try our very best to let everything go, somehow try to force ourselves to believe that it's just anxiety, and soak in all those sensations without reacting to them physically or mentally. And this right there is where I see the problem with how many people talk about anxiety acceptance. I think that in these kinds of situations, it is basically impossible to do. It's just not the way how our brains have been designed. And unless you have some yogi-like mental strengths or have trained this for years, it's going to be very difficult to fight off that natural fear reaction and that immense urge to find out what is happening to us. It's after all our natural body response that is there when we feel in danger and will do whatever it can to keep us safe. And because we look at acceptance as a tool of sort, we kind of go into the whole thing with expecting some kind of effect or maybe even an immediate change. So we sit or stand there, scared from anxiety, and then try to empty our mind, all in the hopes to let this pass. That is the unfortunate irony of the whole thing for most of us. Because when using acceptance as something to directly counteract something we find unpleasant, that pretty much defeats the whole purpose of this technique, and in reality creates so much more friction. You see, most of us are probably so in tune with our body and notice every little ache, twitch or rash because we have trained our mind over and over again to keep scanning, keep staying on the lookout for any hidden signs of a disease. Because it gives us this false sense of being in control or prepared. Being this hyper-aware all the time alone will cook up so much anxiety, and suddenly we start to even misinterpret the most normal sensations for something serious. Intense focus will always bring up something and magnify even the smallest feelings and sensations. The way that I got out of the cycle of this constant search for hints and signs for some hidden disease was to completely give up. I'm not going to pretend that I had it all figured out back then. That for sure wasn't the case. What happened was that I was so devastated and drained by going to so many doctors and getting so many tests done, while there never was anything that proved that I was genuinely ill. And hey, when I gave up that search, I was still pretty much convinced that there must be something wrong with me, but I didn't have anything more I could do. I was forced to take that very important leap of faith and continue living my life not knowing. And taking that step doesn't mean you will no longer face panic attacks or anxiety. After all, you probably still fear that something might happen. But what this does is, it enables you to continue living. You might even start to seek out situations that you used to avoid because of anxiety or depression. You no longer follow that all or nothing path. You go on with your life alongside the anxiety and the discomfort, because you know that you've tried everything to get to the bottom of it without any results. Fear and panic symptoms will come up, but you kind of expected them already. You knew that they would eventually pop up, but you don't do anything about it, and instead you go on knowing full well that there isn't much you can do. After all, you've tried everything already. When combining this mindset with everything I talk about in this recovery playlist linked up here that is geared towards lowering stress, but then this attitude of giving up, which really sounds very negative, transforms into this flow of a sort. You start to automatically see symptoms for what they are. True acceptance suddenly becomes almost easy and natural. You'll face ups and downs, but the time spent to get back on track gets shorter and shorter. You face symptoms, but don't associate them with danger, but as something maybe annoying or perhaps even painful. The difference is, now you can logically explain what is going on with you. That lower stress has truly activated that switch in your brain. Or like it often is described in anxiety videos, you have successfully rewired your brain. Acceptance for me was a lot more like a byproduct of living life and lowering stress, rather than a tool or some kind of mental ability that I had to train. That wasn't the case. I truly gave up feeling better, carried on knowing full well that I will feel uncomfortable, and worked on all these healthy habits because I wanted to transform my life, and not because I wanted to treat the anxiety symptoms. So you see, my belief is, the key is not to start practicing acceptance for recovery. No, acceptance is a lot more like acknowledging your current state, understanding that you will feel uneasy, but still trying to grow just a bit every week or even every day, besides feeling uncomfortable. So if you're still here watching this right now, maybe start a mind map of all your fears and what you've done so far to get to the bottom of it. You will see that you've been turning in circles for a long time. Seeing it black on white is an eye-opener and gives you that confidence to take that also important leap of faith and lean into that discomfort so that you can come out stronger and more confident and eventually live an anxiety-free life. Thanks for watching, everyone. And if you're new here and want to see more anxiety-related content just like this one, consider subscribing.